Now, this is a story about those shadow figures again, those figures in black that have been haunting my family. And this one comes from my brother, and it happened during a near death experience. My brother went to the ER because he was very sick, and he was in the cardiac unit. And he was in and out of consciousness, and he was actually under a burn blanket because his fever was so high. And the doctors didn't know if he was going to live. Now, when he was in and out of consciousness, he remembers this black figure about 2.5 foot tall that was all wispy and smoky like, and when it walked, it would leave like a trail of black behind it that unfurled or waved like a flag. And he said this black figure walked down the hallway and then walked back up the hallway. Then he said it stood halfway in the doorway looking at him. And my brother knew what it was. He called it the soul stealer. And he said he felt that its job was to get his soul. So it was like a Grim Reaper. And my brother said to it, "Well, you're not taking me because I'm not going." And he said the figure looked at him, turned around, walked back down the hallway again. Said he came into the room, he climbed up on the wall, looked at him. And my brother's like, you need to leave right now. I'm not going. He goes, I got a life to live. I got things I have to do. I'm not going with you. I'll fight you every step of the way. Said the soul stealer left the room, went back up the hall, came back again, and looked in the room at him. My brother's like, you can do whatever you want. You can try to take me. He goes, but they're only going to revive me. And I'm not going with you. I will fight you every inch of the way. My brother told me, he says, if you don't leave, I'm going to call the nurse. And at that time, my brother heard the nurse walking down the hallway, and the soul stealer was standing in the doorway looking at him, and it turned around and it looked down the hallway towards the nurse, and then it walked away down the hallway and left. And then the nurse came in, and I think my brother lost consciousness. Then the next day, when my brother woke up, there was a priest there. And my brother's like, they sent you here, didn't they? The doctors thought I was going to die. And the priest goes, no, I just want to come and check on you. He goes, no, no. My brother was saying, the doctors told you I was going to die, didn't they? And then the priest broke down and said, yeah. He said they pretty much thought you'd be dead in a day or two. And my brother's like, well, I'm not leaving. I'm not dying. And the priest said, well, that's good to have a positive attitude. And my brother said, no, it's not a positive attitude. They came last night and I told them to go away. So the priest said, you mind if I pray? And so basically the priest gave him his last rites. And then my brother lost consciousness again. And then when my brother was out again, he said he was up at the ceiling looking down at his body. And the doctor and the nurse were putting the pads on his chest and they were arguing back and forth. And then when my brother gained consciousness again, that doctor was back. And he told the doctor, he said, yeah, he goes, I recognize you. I know you. The doctor said, no, you don't. He goes, this is the first time we met. And my brother said, no, no, I was up at the ceiling watching the body. You were arguing with the nurse about the pads on my chest. And the doctor was astounded. He couldn't believe it. And then it was for about a week my brother was in there. He was going in and out of consciousness. His platelets were dropping. There were a few experts called in to see, to manage his case. And then when he finally came through, the doctor told him, he said, you only had a 2% chance to live. We don't know how you lived. And my brother said, to himself at that time, he said, the reason I lived is because, the soul stealer came to claim me and I told him I would fight him and I wasn't going. And my brother's convinced that's the only reason why he lived. Now, my brother had another instance a few years before that where he was sick. He had an infection in his face and he went to the ER and the doctors said the same thing. It didn't look good. He was really sick. They admitted him for a few days. And my brother said he saw that shadow like figure. Remember, 2.5 feet tall, black and wispy, walking up and down the hallway. It didn't pay him any attention at that time, but it was still walking up and down the hallway. And my brother took notice of it. And my brother is really convinced that, you know, maybe that soul stealer was there for another person, but he saw it. And talking to my brother about it, it reminds me of the Gravelings from the show Dead Like Me. But in this case, the little demon wispy like figures aren't actually there to cause the death, they're there to claim the soul. So my brother believes he cheated death. He believes he met a Grim Reaper like figure called a soul stealer. And he says the only reason he didn't take him is because he stood up to him and fought him and said no. So it leads you to question that maybe there is a bureaucracy after death. Maybe there are beings that have this job to escort a soul, to claim a soul. And maybe we have some sort of choice exactly when we go. Maybe we can tell them, no, I'm not going to go right now. Eventually, we won't have a choice. But as far as my brother's concerned, that night he did have a choice. And because he said no, he wasn't going, he's still alive today.